Hello and welcome to a special ITV News Central programme live from Nottinghamshire, as both the County and City Council are heavily criticised for failing to protect children in their care. Children were abused over decades in care homes and foster places, causing lifelong trauma.
We were stripped of our integrity, we were stripped of our dignity, we were stripped of our identity.
We'll be speaking to survivors, getting their reaction to today's report.
Hopefully it's the start of the healing process. Hopefully I can become the woman I want to be.
The report also highlights current failings. So why are children in care still at risk? We'll be asking bodies from both councils. Good evening. An independent inquiry into child sexual abuse has delivered a damning report on the way councils in Nottinghamshire failed hundreds of children in their care over decades. The harm was widespread in children's homes and in foster care. The children were beaten, raped, and sexually assaulted by the very people charged with looking after them. But the report concludes lessons were not learned by the council despite the mounting evidence of what was happening. In a moment, we'll hear from the survivors of the abuse. First, though, to our correspondent Alison Mackenzie in London, where the report was published. And Alison, what does it say?
Yes, good evening from London. This is it, the National Report and Investigation into Children in the Care of Nottinghamshire Councils. They shine a big light into what was going on over decades, and the findings are deeply shocking. Number one, both councils failed in their statutory duty to protect children in care from sexual abuse. Number two, it's because they exposed children to the risk and reality of sexual abuse perpetrated primarily by predatory residential staff and foster carers. What was going on was that unqualified staff were being appointed to these children's homes and foster parents unchecked. No disciplinary action, no lessons learned if anything went wrong. It was a culture of cover-up and denial. And the conclusion of this report, this national inquiry, is, they say, continuing to the present day, neither the county nor the city councils have a process for the regular reports of the number of allegations of sexual abuse. Therefore, it means that there is inconsistent and unfollowed up complaints for going into the future. We've been speaking today for reaction from survivors and child abuse campaigners.
I'm glad that there has been findings and I'm glad that it's all come out, but at the same time I still feel that it's not all uncovered and it was still carrying on. People are retiring and not being held accountable. They're going to be living off great big fat pensions while victims and survivors are struggling financially.
It should never have come to this in the first place if people had been doing their jobs properly in the first place to protect vulnerable children.
All I wanted to do was tell people what I've gone through, and that's 59 years ago, and I've still got it up here, word for word, to stop other kids from being abused.
There's people today that are not here. Their families are devastated. They will never get the children back. There were people that will never get their fathers back because they've committed suicide. There's children that have been left orphaned because of this. And all because people did not do nothing about it. And they knew and chose to ignore. They need an absolute clear out. They need a complete clear out of all those people and start again with people that are qualified in the job that they're doing.
Hopefully it's the start of the healing process. Hopefully I can become the mum I want to be. Give my children what my children need. They need their mum back, and at the moment they haven't got her. Shocking findings. Some of those people waiving their right to anonymity, others gave evidence anonymously to the inquiry over a 3-week painful period last October. But what emerged to me most shockingly was the suggestion this isn't something historical, it's all okay today. Very much no. Big question marks over procedures and practices today, as I discovered from the inquiry secretary, John O'Brien.
what the panel did is they looked at the Ofsted reports that go beyond the period looked at by this report. It's fair to say that in the case of the county, those Ofsted reports show an improving regime because the reports do show improvement. But in the case of the city, November 2018, a report across the entire scope of children's social services, so that's residential and foster care, said needs improvement. And that's in November 2018.
Are children safe today?
I can only look at what was found in this report, and we found a regime that didn't seem to recognise their responsibilities, didn't put in place the things that needed to happen. And so over very many years, we have had children being abused. It's worth saying that this is about culture as well as about custom and practice.
Two main recommendations tonight. Number one, that both county and city council should check thoroughly foster carers and residential carers, their credentials, and that the city council should bring about an independent external evaluation of the whole way they handle sexual abuse allegations. They have 6 months in which to report back to this inquiry.
Alison, thank you for that. Of all the children's homes where abuse took place in Nottinghamshire, one in particular stands out. Dubbed a home from hell, Beechwood Children's Home in Nottingham was infamous as a place of violence and cruelty. Today's report says staff there were both threatening and violent, with physical abuse commonplace. Some of those sent there as children have waived their right to anonymity to speak to ITV News about the horrors that they witnessed, and a warning that there are accounts of abuse in Peter Byrne's report that some viewers may find distressing.
Totally abandoned.
Was that prison?
How on earth?
For those who spent time there, Beechwood Children's Home in Mapley Park is synonymous with pain and mental torture.
There was no nice home furnishings. It was metal beds in an empty room with bars on the windows. It was horrible.
Alison Walters was 14 when she was sent to Beechwood. Vulnerable and isolated, she says she was targeted by care worker John Dent, who one night crept into her bedroom.
I woke up and he got his mouth over mine trying to kiss me, and he says, don't make it, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you. I had to fight to keep him from doing what he was trying to do.
He was acquitted of offences relating to Alison Walters, but was later found guilty of 11 sex offences involving 4 other youngsters in the 1970s, including 3 at Beechwood. Claire Blake was just 10 when she arrived at Beechwood. Frightened, lonely, and desperate for affection, she recalls staff as cruel and uncaring when she asked if she could go home.
They went, no. I went, oh, well, why not? They went, because you're not wanted. None of the parents want you back.
She also recalls staff terrorising the children.
I'd hear the kids being taken out of the rooms at night time, being made to run around the buildings in their bare feet and their underwear, being chased by the staff. They thought it was funny, but it was terrifying, especially when they got the butcher knives out and they were chasing us with them as well.
Claire says one male member of staff also made her wash in front of him.
You're getting in the bath. I was like, but I'm not getting in the bath with you standing there. He's like, well, you're getting in the bath one way or another. You either go in or I put you in. And at this time I was literally I was crying.
As well as sexual abuse, Beechwood had a reputation for physical violence. Dubbed Fight Night, children say they would be made to box each other. Mick, not his real name, was among those who say they were forced to take part.
I can distinctly remember the staff were actually betting money on who was going to do what and how long it was going to take. I can remember fights where girls were kicking each other, ripping hair out, full blown fight, gloves, or sometimes no gloves, bare knuckles.
Children were also exploited. In the 1980s, underage girls from Beechwood were recruited to work at a peep show club in Hyson Green and paid money in return for sexual favours. Described by one judge as a home from hell, Beechwood eventually closed in 2006. Part of the complex was later demolished to make way for new housing. Today, the buildings may be gone, but for Alison and Claire, the memories of isolation and abandonment have stayed with them.
There was just nobody, absolutely nobody that I could talk to. Nobody that felt safe enough to be able to say, look, this has happened to me. I just didn't feel that I'd been believed.
We were stripped of our integrity, we were stripped of our dignity, we were stripped of our identity. They clearly didn't care what happened to any child that went in there.
Central to the inquiry's criticisms are the councils, but what did they know and when? Yasmin Bottleby has been examining how they ignored the warning signs, dismissed the allegations of abuse made by children and staff, and were more concerned about reputation than protecting children in their care.
Nottinghamshire County Council and Nottingham City Council, two authorities who for more than 5 decades failed children in their care. During the inquiry, some of those in charge at the time were quick to hold up their hands.
Wholeheartedly can I offer my personal apologies to young people who came into care to be protected, nurtured and helped, and clearly we failed them.
But the warnings were there. In the 1990s, Joni Cameron Blair worked for both councils inspecting children's homes. For years she reported her fears of abuse to her bosses, fears she claims were ignored.
Complaints of the most serious nature towards children. Been left on people's desks for weeks. I discovered they continued to sit on somebody's desk until the injuries of the children had healed, so there would be no evidence gathered.
It was an attitude reflected in the way some staff appeared to view children in their care. Ken Rigby was Deputy Superintendent at Beechwood Children's Home for 18 years.
Was there a culture of staff at Beechwood being physically violent towards children?
I do not think so. I think it was the other way around.
Years later, Mr. Rigby would later tell a firm of solicitors,
I'm not in the least surprised that some former residents of Beechwood are now looking to cash in by making false accusations of physical abuse in the hope of securing a large compensation payout.
And when victims did come forward, internal documents revealed Nottinghamshire County Council's approach to abuse survivors making compensation claims.
Some may be moaners or money seekers. An apology may be dangerous as it amounts to an admission of legal liability which can open the department to legal claims.
But it wasn't just the lawyers digging in their heels. In 1994, when a social worker acquitted of sexual abuse at trial was later dismissed after an investigation, trade unions accused council bosses of
placing the interests of the child above the interests of the residential social workers,
dubbing it as
contrary to natural justice.
What also emerged was how often the authorities ignored the signs. In the 1980s, when staff raised concerns about Miriam Bamkin's sexual relationship with a 15-year-old boy at Amberdale Observation Centre, they were told to sweep it under the carpet. And in the year 2000, despite several allegations of abuse against him, social worker Dean Gathercole was allowed to return to work. Last year, he was jailed for 19 years for raping 2 teenage girls in his care. Eventually, denial was no longer an option. When social worker Andres Loggins was jailed in 2016 for raping girls in his care, Nottinghamshire County Council made 2 public apologies. But from the City Council, radio silence. During the inquiry, it became clear why. A document laying out the position of the then council leader, John Collins.
We will apologise when there is something to apologise for.
The current council leader, David Mellon, was left to explain what it meant.
The statement says we will apologise. We haven't reached that point where we've made that decision to do so corporately.
From this body, this corporation, because is it correct, Mr. Russell, that the county council is a corporation?
Yeah.
Let
me just say what I've got to say, Nicky, because I've said to you a few times in the past that because we're a public body,
a corporation, by the way.
Yeah, or a corporation, we've got to go through a process.
For Jeremy Cameron Blair, it was symptomatic of how senior council bosses and staff turned a blind eye in the face of overwhelming evidence.
I don't know how they look at themselves in the mirror. I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't know how they go on to even enjoy a pension. For me, it's been earned with children's blood.
Well, we can hear from the councils involved now. Our reporter Nancy Cole is over at Nottingham City Council at Loxley House. And Nancy, is it not the case that today's report specifically comments on the way the City Council has gone about apologising to survivors?
Yeah, the City Council has been called guarded and slow to publicly apologise for these sayings. It's also been called crass, the comments that it made last year, saying we'll apologise when there's something to apologise for. Joining me now is the Chief Executive, Ian Currier. So Ian, you've not handled this very well, really. What have you got to say for yourself?
Well, we've been apologising to victims and survivors privately for a long time now when they've been coming to us. And I think we deeply underestimated how much a public apology meant to some survivors, despite a number of people we spoke to saying it was a private and meaningful personal apology that they wanted. We clearly underestimated what people felt about the public apology and how important it was to them. And I am very sorry about that, because I think we didn't understand how much that meant to them and how much it would have helped them move on.
Do you think you've given a full public apology today in front of the media for these people that have been, their lives have been so badly affected by the abuse that they suffered?
Absolutely. I apologise very sincerely from the council's side. We did apologise before the hearing. I know people felt that that was too late, but things came to light during the inquiry, which made it very, very clear that there certainly are failings on our side, and we accept the report. And we've only had it for a few hours. I want to digest it and see the detail of it, so that we can now start putting forward a plan to move forward. But
just very quickly, how are you going to turn this around? Because it says there's still no processes in place, just very briefly.
Well, I didn't say there's no process in place. What it says is our learning has been slow and that there have been areas that we could do better. And we have to read the report, we have to look at the recommendations. I welcome the recommendations, I welcome the review, and I want us to be able to take those on and move forward.
Korea, thank you very much. The council says there's lots of work still to be done.
Nancy, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Nancy. Well, here at the County Council House, I'm now joined by Councillor Colin Pettigrew, who is the Corporate Director of Children, Families and Cultural Services at Nottinghamshire County Council. How do you explain that this catalogue of abuse went on for so long under the noses of the authorities?
Yes, that's one of the things that the inquiry has looked at in a 160-page document. Robin quite rightly has been highly critical of the County Council in the past, and some more recent individual cases. This should have been, and it was apparent that children were being abused in our care, not exhaustively, but predominantly during the 70s, 80s and 90s. And we know of the complaints that we've had and the claims for compensation, appropriate claims for compensation, but 9 out of 10 of those claims come from that period. The children have been let down, not let down, but abjectly failed by the County Council in the past. Some of those victims and survivors are now well into their 50s, 60s and beyond, and are still suffering from that impact.
Now, on these occasions, you hear the usual platitude of lessons have been learned, but in this case, according to the report, lessons haven't been learned.
Yes, the report identifies that over a period of decades, there were a number of internal reports in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s that didn't affect change as they should have done. I think some of the reasons for that is many of those reports were internal. All of the reports that I've seen during that period were commissioned by the county council and written by officers within the county council. With the benefit of hindsight and in retrospect, I think that one of the things that might have made a difference was for the county council to invite in an external independent investigator to do some of those reports.
Well, are you alarmed by this latest report? Are you ashamed? Are heads going to roll?
3 questions there. Am I alarmed? Yes, of course I'm alarmed. Am I ashamed? Yes, I'm ashamed professionally. But in the past, children who should have been safe in our care weren't safe in our care. And I've expressed before and express again our profound sorrow and apology for that.
And will anybody resign over this?
I don't know the answer to that. Bob, we've only received the report today. The report does identify some individuals that made criticisms of. None of those individuals are current employees of the county council.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Well, another organisation that's been criticised is Nottinghamshire Police, and our correspondent Phil Brewster has been speaking to the officer in charge of the police investigation into historical child abuse. And joins me now, Phil, what does the report say?
Well, I think it's clear that Nottinghamshire Police seriously and totally underestimated the scale of the investigation facing them. Just for some context, 994 allegations of historical, sexual or physical abuse made, 685 suspects identified, 13 convictions so far. Now, I've been speaking to the Chief Superintendent, Rob Griffin, and began by asking him what he made of the criticism levelled at him by the inquiry.
Some criticism levelled at us about the way that we'd responded to allegations in the past. And many victims and survivors felt that the way that we dealt with things in the past was not appropriate and that they felt let down. A foster child, police officers told her that she should be grateful that foster parents were looking after her and that she was a very bad girl for running away and she was escaping abuse. I mean, when you hear that, how does that make you feel? It makes me realise that we didn't deal with things in the most appropriate way in years gone by. Then in one case, eventually one time I was told by text that police had closed the case. That's hard to hear. Some victims asked to be updated by text, others would prefer that to be done in person, others on the telephone. Some not at all. So trying to design an approach that works for every victim and survivor is really difficult.
Why is Ken Clark still walking free when everybody knows he's a paedophile?
I just want to try and stick to Equinox.
I thought as much.
Well, that's why we're here, isn't it?
Well, I think what Mark said it could be relevant because stuff of Centre Superintendent Helen Chamberlain.
Not unless you've got evidence.
Daybreak had an opportunity to interview several people that made allegations that Kenneth Park took children to Bridgeford Children's Home.
Okay. Well, I want to try and focus on why I'm here and the questions I can answer.
I was shocked by that, because the fact that you don't feel shocked by what Mark just said suggests that you already know that there is something to answer some questions. I would have been incredibly shocked. Mark just come out with something like that, and you just take it as though you know. What's the story about it?
We're doing the Superintendent Chamberlain knows as well.
I'm shocked.
Let's try and keep us on track.
The inquiry also heard evidence of an investigation initially understaffed, under-resourced, and ill-equipped to deal with the growing numbers of allegations. A lack of commitment by some staff. Certain individuals not committed to the inquiry. One individual couldn't write. Regular requests for transfer to other teams of investigations. I mean, professionally, is that embarrassing for you?
I think when we first put that team together, we underestimated the type of investigation it was, and I don't think the way that we resourced it was necessarily appropriate.
Operation Daybreak began in 2010. There will be some people who will say, why did it take
5 to 6 years before your first the type of evidence that most prosecutions are built on these days, phone evidence, CCTV, identification evidence, forensics and the like, that's evidence that's simply not available to us because of the passage of time. Might we have gained some convictions earlier had we resourced it better and more quickly? It's difficult to say, but I think what's important to recognise is that the learning that went on in those early years is reflecting how we set ourselves up from 40 and 50 and beyond, and actually have got some justice for some of the survivors from that time.
If someone is watching this, a survivor who's been abused in care, whether it's in a child home or in foster care, and is thinking of coming forward, but is mistrustful of police for whatever reason, what would you say?
I would say, please come forward through a friend, through anybody that you know, anybody that's provided support to you. Please come forward because we need to hear your story, we need to listen to what you've got to say, and where we can, bring people to justice.
Well, we're now joined by David Horace, who's been campaigning alongside survivors for many years. David, thanks for joining us. What's your reaction to today's report?
I'm very pleased with the report. I think it's very clear, it's written in plain English, and I think the survivors will welcome the honesty that's in there. It's what they've been saying for years. All of the allegations that they've been bringing forward, and nobody was listening to them. Well, they've listened now, and it's no longer an allegation, it's a fact. It's written in history, it's been found by a public inquiry that scale of abuse, the devastation of children's homes, not just Beechwood, once that was a case study, but it was an institution amongst all of Nottingham's homes, that they were really put in fear, raped, bullied, awful.
Horrendous, isn't it? I mean, do you feel that children in care in Nottinghamshire now are safe?
I don't think we can say that. I really don't think we can say that right now. There are still areas which need improvement. I mean, Ofsted came to Nottingham City straight after the inquiry and found that their services required improvement. Professor Jay has given both the councils homework, and they've got 6 months to come back to them with harmful sexual behaviours, which is, neither of them done very well on. And many of the councils have not looked at the previous foster parents and the current foster parents just to make sure that they've done a sanity check and a safeguarding check on those people.
What support now is available for survivors, and is it adequate?
No, it's not adequate, but we've worked hard with the PCC to put in place some counselling and advocacy support through the Sexual Violence Support Service in Nottingham. And we're working at the moment with the NHS to access what's called Step 4 therapy for those that need deeper therapeutic intervention. There are still some issues with that pathway, but what we really need is a system where survivors can dip in and dip out as they need it, because they will go through ups and downs with their life. For many, they've kind of lived on drugs and alcohol to kind of subsume their anger. Now we've got to let them rebuild their lives.
Indeed. David, thank you for joining us. Well, that's it from us for tonight. The ITV Evening News is coming up, and we're back with a late update at 10:30. Now, in the meantime, if you've been affected by anything that you've seen on tonight's programme, head to our website where we have links and contact details for support. We leave you tonight with some of the emotional views of those at the centre of Nottinghamshire's history of abuse. Good night.
We were like toys. We were basically toys for them to play with.
It's not a time in our history that we're at all proud of.
We weren't people, we weren't children, we were a paycheck.
I still feel as though we had to fight to get to the place we are today. That wasn't fair on the survivors. This could have been dealt with a long time ago.
There was just nobody that felt safe enough to be able to say, look, this has happened to me. I just didn't feel that I could believe.
We should thank the victims and survivors for making sure that we play their part in shining a very bright light on what's been a very dark period for Nottinghamshire County Council.
what they don't seem to get is they took our individuality away.
Good evening, welcome to East Midlands Today with Anne Davis and me, Dominic Neal.
Good evening. Well, tonight a damning report on child sex abuse in Nottinghamshire's care system says that lessons haven't been learned. The independent inquiry found that councils failed to protect hundreds of youngsters who were targeted in children's homes and in foster families.
Well, it's recommending better checks for carers at the city and county councils. And today's report says children in foster homes could still be at risk. Here's our social affairs correspondent, Jeremy Paul.
Yes, Dominic, this is the culmination of a fight for the truth that's been going on for decades. Childhoods destroyed by horrific crime, failures at the highest level. This huge report is a catalogue of Nottinghamshire's darkest secrets. And tonight, a damning verdict. The city and county councils still haven't learned from their mistakes.
And some breaking news this lunchtime, a damning report on Nottinghamshire's care system.
The news they've waited for so long.
The independent inquiry says the sick.
For these abuse survivors, it's personal. Here, together, for revelations about a scandal that went on for several decades.
Knowing that we've finally been heard, that's great. They've humiliated us. They took away our dignity. They took away our pride. They took away our self-esteem. They took away our trust and our hopes.
I'm astonished to find out that people who were put in a position of trust, that trust, and were being paid for it.
This is just the beginning. It's going to take a long time for that dark cloud to be lifted.
The independent inquiry, chaired by Professor Alexis Jay, spent a month looking at Nottinghamshire's care system. Today's report says there are likely to be many more victims than the 350 who gave evidence. Many were sent here to the notorious Beechwood Children's Home. The inquiry found the culture there allowed abusers to thrive, and there was abuse in a dozen other residential units.
I've been in the inquiry now since March 2015. I think this was probably, in terms of scale, the most shocking that we've seen. And actually, if you think about it, we're not talking here about one individual that either blocks or actively participated in the sexual abuse of children. We're just talking about a regime that over many years we didn't recognise what they need to do to protect children.
Perpetrators were predatory residential staff and foster carers. Children abused other children too. The inquiry found victims weren't believed despite appalling physical and sexual abuse. And the city and county councils simply failed to protect them and failed to act on reviews showing that things needed to change.
I think they are all happy that there's that acknowledgement that this went wrong, because we all knew it, but now it's in paper, and I think that was very important. Now we just have to make sure that everything's followed through, so that it's not all a wasted effort for them.
A few of the abusers had been jailed. Andres Logan's targeted youngsters he was supposed to be caring for at Beechwood, and Patrick Gallagher was a foster father who abused a string of children. And today's report says there are still weaknesses in that foster care system, and the councils still need better processes for reporting and responding to child sex allegations.
I want to see some accountability, but the first thing should be to sort out people like the people I represent, many people who still don't have compensation. In one case, doesn't even have a completed file that he's been seeking for the last couple of years.
They have been coming in since 2003.
It was this angry campaign by Mickey Summers that prompted the Nottinghamshire inquiry.
Over 400 survivors actually came forward. I think I've done my job, and maybe the rest of those survivors that have come forward will be the final nail in the coffin, and we all get some kind of closure by the removal of people from public office.
Sadly, there is a dreadful stain on the history of this council.
There have been several official apologies for many survivors. They're too little, too late. But today, final vindication that they were shockingly let down. Some strong recommendations from the inquiry too. It says the councils both need to do more to assess potential risks posed by current and former residential staff and foster carers. And it wants the city to ask independent experts to look at how they respond to harmful sexual behaviours. And we've heard a mixed response today from survivors. Claire Blake was abused during her time in care homes, and for her, today has been a long time coming.
I don't know what the word is. It's an amazement sort of thing that we're actually finally being able to be, we're being listened to, we're being understood, and we're actually being believed.
Does it go far enough?
No, because no, it doesn't. No, I think it needs to be further. I think we need to do more of the investigation side of it, because there's still children out there that have gone through it that aren't being believed.
Have you had your voice heard?
I felt like an atom bomb had exploded inside me, and a tremendous amount of relief and peace, something I've never had, just kind of washed over me, and it just felt so good.
So can you now move forward?
Yes, I'm finally looking forward to closing that them chapters of my life and moving forward with the next chapter of knowing that I never asked for any of it. It wasn't my fault. I was technically a victim, but I'm a survivor.
Powerful words there from Claire Blake, and we've had some strong responses today too. Nottinghamshire County Council accepts that it didn't learn from its mistakes, that it failed in its legal duty to protect children in care from sexual abuse, and that it didn't assess allegations effectively or rigorously.
But there are a number of things that we need to improve on. We've identified, and the report recognises that there have been improvements within our services, including services like fostering. But there are also some weaknesses that we've identified that we need to understand better, and we'll improve on those too.
And today's report says those survivors still aren't getting enough support and counselling. It's also criticised the police response. The night before said it's learned lessons. And the former City Council leader, John Collins, gets a mention too for saying that he would apologise when there was something to apologise for. Today's report says that was crass and caused avoidable upset.
Okay, Jeremy Hall, thank you. Well, David Mellon is the leader of Nottingham City Council, has been a councillor since 1995, spent 10 years on the executive and has been in charge of education and early intervention in Nottingham. So, Councillor Mellon, the report's findings kind of really come as no surprise at all to you.
No, they don't make easy reading. We participated fully in the inquiries hearings in London in October last year, and were asked lots of questions and provided lots of evidence. And the criticisms that were there appeared in this report today. So no, not easy reading, but not really a surprise.
It also says that lessons haven't been learned, so there's a possibility that children are still being abused. Are you happy the council's doing enough now to stop this?
We've done a number of things since the period that was described in the report, particularly the Beechwood home on Woodbury Road. So none of our children's homes are anything like that now. They're all small units, family homes. You wouldn't know them to be a children's home if you walk down the street, and the maximum number of children in them is 4. But we need to make sure that the recommendations of ICSA today are fully looked into and responded to. And obviously there's reports about foster carers too. We've got some wonderful people who care for our children in their own homes, but we need to make sure that the processes of assessing them are robust as they possibly can be. And we will go back and look at any previous complaints about foster carers and look about those again, just to see whether there's anything that needs to be followed up.
You're saying this now, but your guarded response came in for criticism by the inquiry. A mealy-mouthed response almost. You know, what was going on? What was the attitude? Were young people not believed, or were they dismissed?
The guarded response is about the apology, and we accept that our public apology wasn't as fulsome as it could be, and it wasn't early enough. We apologised to many survivors privately as they requested, so they could actually be in a private room and look at what had happened to them and have that face-to-face apology. But for some survivors, the public apology was also important, and we didn't do that soon enough.
The survivors group in Nottingham say that there need to be resignations. Very briefly, will there be, and do you agree there should?
I think for Beechwood, for example, none of the people who worked at Beechwood are in the council employ now. The staff there now are looking to improve the situation.
rather than political oversight.
There's been a number of different political oversights over the 6 decades that we've been looking at. We didn't take responsibility for Beechwood till 1998 and then closed it. We didn't close it quickly enough. But decisions have been made, but not quick enough. The decisions, and clearly young people have been let down. Young people who should have been protected have not been.
Okay, David, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.